I can tell you that this is probably the first joint interview they have done in about 10 years.
Where are we going to sit?
Wherever you like.
Why don't you sit in the middle? I still remember the VP gig.
All right. So how did this happen? You're just backstage, say hello, and...
Yeah. We were talking actually about whether, first, I didn't think Al was going to be able to come. Then he had to come to New York for something else, so said he could come by. Then he has this interview with you. Then we started talking about climate change and this UN report that's coming up in a few days. And one thing led to another, and here we are.
It has been a while, hasn't it? Did you join?
Well, we talk frequently, and we have done some things together, but I don't think it really took you, Charlie, to get us to do a sit-down joint.
I'll take that credit if you'll give it to me.
He's a better politician than I am now. You know?
Everyone here knows
that's.
But, I don't know. We do talk a lot.
About everything.
But especially about all this energy business. Right. First of all, when I can't figure out what's going on, I call him and he explains it to me.
I try.
And then
I understand.
I just kind of go around trying to figure out how to put together projects that will work. But it's a fascinating issue, and I still believe that we're going to do the right thing before calamity hits the earth, but we're pushing it. And I believe there are lots of economically attractive ways to fight climate change that we have ignored. And I don't think one of the things Al knows a ton more about than I do is how to calculate the real price of what we're doing now, especially in carbon dioxide. But I think that we live in a world where those of us who want to fight climate change are expected to pay all the cost up front. Those who want to keep the old energy economy can spread their cost out over 20 years, and they get the benefit of all these so-called externalities like air pollution and people not being able to breathe and our children having asthma, which aren't priced on them at all. And that's what I was talking to him about and how we wound up.
It's a good time to turn to you, Mr. Vice President. Where are we, and what is going on, and what are the trends, and how do you see?
Well, first of all, Charlie, they gave me this mic because I don't think this one's picking it up. But first of all, I want to say what everybody here also knows, that President Clinton and his team have been doing a great job in trying to address the issue that we're talking about here, and I compliment him on that. There are lots of things going on, two in particular. The big trend toward increasing global warming pollution is still accelerating. And, you know, a few years ago, people were talking about China imminently surpassing the U.S. in carbon emissions. Now they're double the U.S., and China and India have really been supercharging their coal burning. But both of them are beginning to take stock of the cost. And the cost of carbon is being paid by all of us, partly in the form of these climate-related extreme weather events. Look at Boulder, Colorado last week. Look at my hometown, Nashville, 3 years ago. Thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and businesses, and none of them had insurance because it had never flooded in those areas. They called it a once-in-a-thousand-year flood. Look at the fires in the West. Look at the Pakistan flood. Look at the Russian drought and fires that put food prices at an all-time high. So we're paying the price, the cost of carbon. Look at Superstorm Sandy in this city. But our economic system, our market system, does not contain a price on carbon pollution, so it is effectively invisible in our economic calculations. It's an externality. That's the buzzword that people know. And so we need to put a price on carbon. We also, in the political system, need to put a price on denial, because a lot of the biggest polluters are stealing a page from the tobacco industry's playbook. You know, remember they hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and paid them to lie into the camera saying they were doctors and there were no problems with cigarettes. Well, 40 years later, people finally came to their senses. The large carbon polluters are trying to undermine the science. And what President Clinton just said about the IPCC report coming out Friday, you know that they have geared up with tons of money and lobbyists to try to play the world for a fool again. But Lincoln's aphorism applies. And when people feel and understand these extreme weather events, they're way more common and way more severe than they used to be. And even people who don't want to get into a discussion about global warming are looking and noticing and saying, hey, we got to do something about this. And now, here's the good news. The other thing that's happening is the price of renewable electricity from solar photovoltaics and wind is coming down the way the computer chip prices came down even as the performance increased. And there are billions of people in the world now that live in regions where you can get electricity from solar and wind at a price cheaper than you can get it from coal and the average of conventional electricity. And the more we use, the cheaper it gets, but the more coal and oil we use, the more expensive it gets. So we are on the cusp of a tremendous change. We need policy. People can change light bulbs, and that's important, but we need to change laws and policies to put a price on carbon.
Okay, the price is going down because of scale and because of what?
Well, it's going down because of scale, yes. Let me give you an example. Years ago, I've always been kind of an early adopter on technology. You know, there are several of us. And I remember knocking on the door of a friend, you know, Tom Downey, was one of my best friends in the Congress. And he'd invite, we'd have dinner together in the summers and when Congress was in. And so one time I got one of these early mobile phones that looks like a big brick, you remember? And I thought it was so cool. I look back at those pictures and I think that looks so stupid, but I had one of those deals and I said, hey, what about dinner tonight? He said, yeah, come on over. And he said, when are you going to get here? And right at that time I knocked on the door and he opened the door and it was like the old SNL Wild and Crazy Guys. Whoa! But that's the way we thought about them at that time. At that time, there were market projections of how quickly that technology would spread throughout the world. Those projections were not only wrong, they were way, way wrong. Why? Because the quality continued to improve as the price continued to go down. And the decisions to purchase were not in the hands of a utility or a gatekeeper guarding a bottleneck. Individuals and individual business people could do it. Same thing is true with solar and wind. And the projections that were made 10 years ago have not only been wrong, they are way, way wrong. In many countries, 20x wrong. It's spreading rapidly. And as, you know, there's a big difference between 32 degrees and 33 degrees or 0 and 1 degree in Celsius. It's the difference between ice and water.
Right.
There's a big similar difference between renewable electricity that sells above the cost of coal electricity and renewable electricity that sells below the cost. That's a big difference. And as we're crossing that threshold, at the same time people become more aware of the cost we're paying for carbon, we are on the threshold of breaking through to a low-carbon economy that's going to create millions of jobs, put new energy into the system. I'm very optimistic about this, but we need a policy shift. We need to put a price on carbon.
You anticipated my next question for both of you. Has this country, is it doing today all that it should do to lead the way?
No, but I think in fairness to the president and to people in Congress who understand this, they may be doing right now all they can do. I think
because of the politics of the
I mean, the EPA has it's been held that they do have the right to regulate carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and Gina McCarthy, the new EPA administrator, has outlined a plan to do that. And the president in Copenhagen tried to get an agreement to set up a finance facility so that, because the problem with a lot of these clean energies in poor places is they got to come up with the money up front, and then the benefits are free, or the energy's free. So he tried to do that. I think the World Bank is going to take the lead on that now, and I think that the United States will have a chance to do that. A lot of states have got good laws. It's very interesting. Texas always condemns this, but they now produce more electricity from wind than all but 6 countries in the world. And they act like it's a bad deal, but actually it's a good deal. Yeah. And so, and if you look at, it's very interesting to see who's for this and who's not. I've been trying to get Puerto Rico, which has electrical cost of approximately 36 cents a kilowatt hour, which is, New York's the highest price in America, 13.9, highest kilowatt hour cost, except for Puerto Rico. And all the Caribbean countries are somewhere between 36 and 51 cents, including the American Virgin Islands, which means we can go down there right now and install solar and wind without subsidies at a profit and set up a model, if you will, for other places. And in America, we don't even, in some states we have really good incentives for building retrofits. So the answer is, no, we're not doing all we should do, but we may be doing all we can do politically.
And how will natural gas change the dynamic of the equation?
Well, it already has changed the dynamic. The renewable energy industry faced a perfect storm just starting a few years ago with the Great Recession and the shale gas boom and the Chinese juggernaut pushing the price of solar and wind below the cost of production here in the U.S., and the failure of policy at Copenhagen, which was teed up by the failure of the U.S. Senate to pass it earlier in 2009. But the shale gas bubble of enthusiasm is beginning to lose some of its momentum for several reasons. Popular resistance is increasing. The demands for water, in many areas the average shale gas well requires 5 million gallons of water, and in water-short regions like northern China, northern India, the American Southwest, it just can't go on. In Europe, the popular resistance is a real problem. Some of the companies from the U.S. have just pulled out of Poland, even though they have a huge resource, they believe, there. So, and also shale gas, there are two mathematical equations, forgive me, but they're pretty stark. One is gas has only half the CO2 of coal. So as a transition fuel, while we're phasing out coal and while renewables are getting cheaper and better, it does make sense. But here's the other equation. Each molecule of natural gas, or methane, which is 99% of it, each gram of methane molecules is 72 times as powerful as a similar amount of CO2 in trapping heat over a 20-year period, and still hugely more powerful over a longer period. And so even if a little bit leaks, it wipes out the advantage. Now, all these things together, along with the water pollution threat, is beginning to slow it down. It has a role to play, but the enthusiasts who believe it's going to change the world forever, I think they're almost certainly wrong. And remember, gas is now selling in Asia at maybe 4 times the price of here in the U.S., and they're about to complete these big LNG export terminals. They started years ago as import terminals, and there's an arbitrage. That is, they're going to take advantage of the chance to sell it at a much higher price than the rest of the world, which means our prices here, unfortunately for some folks, are going to go up. But the shale gas revolution is powerful, significant. It's not going to solve this problem. And people say the glass is half full instead of half empty. The problem is the atmosphere is completely full. We have an accumulated amount of global warming pollution up there now that, according to Jim Hansen and other scientists, traps as much heat every day, extra heat, as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs going off every 24 hours. It's a big planet, but that's a lot of energy. And that's what's putting way more water vapor into the sky, making these downpours and floods bigger, making the winds of the ocean-based storms stronger, melting the ice and raising sea level, moving tropical diseases into the temperate zones, causing crop failures, climate refugees. The list of horribles is unfortunately long, but the list of opportunities to address it is equally long if we have the political will to seize them, and political will is a renewable resource.
That's a good line. I wish I thought of that.
That's the first thing I thought. That's a great line. You both travel around the world, and China, for example, would argue for a while that they would say, look, you guys in the West had an opportunity for industrial development. Give us some slack here. It seems now that the problem of pollution is the driving force by their change rather than...
Yeah, look, the Chinese are going to make a lot more money and create a lot more jobs by leading the transition to a clean energy economy and an energy efficient economy than they are continuing the way they're going.
Do they have more incentive than we do?
Yeah, they can't breathe.
Exactly.
You got, there are uprisings in China now because people are scared to send their kids outside. They don't want their kids to walk to school. When people get a certain amount of income now, they try to find a private school because they have enclosed bubble-like recreational facilities so the kids will be able to breathe without having their lungs polluted. The Yellow River is already dry at certain times of the year, and the Chinese built this big engineering strategy of having 2 gravity-driven canals from the Yangtze to the Yellow, and even the engineers, not just the Greenpeace people, are saying, you got to do something about the fundamental problem. This is going to dry up both rivers, and then you'll really be in terrible shape. So I think that China may become, look at all these demonstrations there. They may become the most environmentally active country on the planet because they can breathe in Beijing and other places.
The life expectancy in northern China, just because of air pollution, has been cut 5.5 years. And as President Clinton said, the political instability, which the Communist Party cares more about than practically anything else,
right. Survival,
is worrying them a great deal. They've just announced 2 weeks ago no new coal plants in the 3 areas that have the worst air pollution. No new coal plants. They announced earlier this year that they are instituting a cap and trade program, which people became allergic to over here, but it makes a lot of sense. A cap and trade program in 5 cities and 2 regions, and they've announced it's a pilot for a nationwide cap and trade program in less than 2 years. And some are skeptical that they will actually follow through on that. But Xi Jinping, their new president, I went back and pulled all his speeches, and my staff did, and got them translated. It's amazing. This guy appears to really understand this extremely well. And yes, they're still burning more coal. They simultaneously produce more coal and import more coal than any other country in the world. But they're coming to grips with it, as are others. India's now put a tax on coal, and they're upping their targets for renewable energy. Charlie, this revolution toward a low-carbon economy is beginning to pick up speed all over the world. Now, here in this country, the conversation hasn't been won yet, because the denialists it's kind of like a family with an alcoholic father who flies into a rage whenever alcohol is mentioned. So the rest of the family learns to just keep quiet and never mention the elephant in the room to keep the peace and avoid the furor and the anger. And a lot of media outlets are scared to death to even mention the word climate. Now, it's beginning to change a little bit, but they get attacked by all these digital
bloggers and everyone else.
But it's beginning to change. Now, in this country, there were 4 anti-climate lobbyists for every single member of the House and Senate when that bill was taken up in 2009 and 2010. Billions of dollars are being spent, again, like the tobacco companies. And it has an impact. In Arkansas and Tennessee, we both use this story. If you see a turtle on a fence post, you can be pretty sure it didn't get there by itself. The fact that the number of people who get question marks in their minds about this has been going up. It's not an accident. That didn't happen by itself, but it's beginning to move in the other direction because Mother Nature is way more powerful when she speaks up than any of these lobbyists.
Okay, but before I turn back to the President, the direct connection, this question was raised after Sandy, between climate change and climate reality. is it a direct one-to-one or what in terms of what
Yeah.
we're experiencing in weather?
Very simple. Look, on October 29, 2012, last year, in the period immediately before and during Superstorm Sandy, the Atlantic Ocean directly off New York and New Jersey was 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the average. Now, what puts more energy into the winds of these ocean-based storms is the energy coming out of the ocean feeding these storms. We all see the weather forecasters say, okay, this hurricane is small, but it's passing an area of warmer water. Well, that's one of the main things that happened. And because of the global temperatures going up, there's been more water vapor evaporated into the sky, 4% more in just 30 years. And that's not 4% just above the area where the rain falls. These storms reach out 2,000 kilometers and funnel it toward where the drain is pulled. If you've got a bathtub full of water and you open the drain, the water going down the drain doesn't come just from the part of the tub directly above the drain. It comes from the whole tub. And these atmospheric basins of water vapor are way fuller now. And you get the stronger winds and more water vapor. Heck, the year just before Superstorm Sandy, we had Irene, which was umpty $1 billion. When my movie came out a few years ago, the single most vitriolic critiques were against the part of the movie that showed an animation of the World Trade Center Memorial Site filling up with ocean water as sea level rose and the storm surges got bigger. They said, that's ridiculous. How demagogic is that? Well, it happened years before it was scheduled to. And it's happening around the world. These storms, these extreme temperature events are 100 times more common than they were in the mid-20th century.
In the time, go ahead.
Do we just to tell you why I think he's right about this and what you should think about if you're not as obsessed with this as we are. I just made an announcement today of a commitment by the Rockefeller Foundation, a remarkable company called Palantir that handles big data and helped us to manage the aftermath of Sandy and deploy volunteers to fix it up, and the City of New Orleans and the architects who deal with sustainable building, and Swiss Re, the big reinsurance company whose American headquarters is about 10 minutes from my house. These reinsurance companies have to, make sure the cities get insured, make sure big companies get insured. They make a living assessing risk. This is what they do. They're not liberal or conservative, they're not Republican or Democrat, but they do live in an evidence-based world. And if they see a big, long trend, they draw a reasonable conclusion that if they want to stay in business, they have to price the risk of insurance based on the long trend. And Eli Broad knows a lot more about this.
He knows something about insurance,
anyway,
doesn't he?
Okay, so there's a reason all these reinsurance companies are telling the cities on the coast they have to build up, dig down, do things to become more sustainable. There's a reason we got a reinsurance company in this deal. They know this is real, and we need to plan for it and reduce the threats.
You're arguing from the beginning here, data determines.
Yeah, we've got. Oh, you want to?
No, he didn't say. To be fair, he was making a point that you can't say that climate change causes any particular storm, but you can say that it leads to greater intensity and frequency of these.
Let me speak to that. And I missed the main thrust of your question before, and I apologize. For a long time, the scientists have said just what we said there a minute ago. They're changing, though. They used to say, hey, be careful. You can't attribute any single storm to global warming. What you have to say is that the odds are changing. Now they've begun to subtly shift this. Scientists like Jim Hansen, Kevin Trenberth, those people on the leading edge, Rosina Bierbaum, they are now saying, hey, look, with 4% more water vapor in the atmosphere, every storm is different because of global warming now. There's a global warming component of every storm. And so these fires out in the West, they're predicting in many regions of the West a 300, 400, 500, even 600% increase in the median area burned with another 1 or 2 degrees increase. And this report coming out says that the increase could be as high as 5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. This is insane. Now, look, Charlie, we have quadrupled global population in less than 100 years. 85% of the energy powering this incredibly powerful global economy is based on carbon fuels. And yet our way of thinking about the connection between the present and the future has not adjusted to this carbon bubble, this discontinuity, this disruption in the relationship between human civilization and the ecological system of the planet. This generation has to face up to this challenge. It is the biggest challenge we have ever faced. One of the things I'm so grateful for what the Clinton Global Initiative is doing, and Climate Reality, and lots of other organizations. There are more than 1 million new NGOs around the world who are putting their shoulders to the wheel on this. There is now a popular awakening. Now, the legacy powers that be are still trying to keep their fingers in the dike, pushing back on the change. But the change is coming, and it has to come, and it has to also come in Washington, D.C.
All right. We're over time, but we haven't had a chance to mention a number of things, including conservation, including nuclear, and a whole range of other issues. But the central message is here. Since this is the Clinton Global Initiative, I'll give the final word to you.
Well, I think that, first of all, when Al Gore and I first met to talk about politics, I mean, I'd run into him before. He was either had just published or was about to publish his book, Earth in the Balance. We had lunch every week for 8 years when we were in the White House, unless one or both of us was out of the country. And I just want to say I'm grateful for his more than 25-year commitment to this cause, because somebody needed to keep up with what the hell was going on. The rest of us have other things going on in our lives. We get busy. We're all like that. So first, I'm grateful. Secondly, what I've tried to do since I've got these foundation operations in other countries anyway, is to try to find projects that illustrate to people that you can have prosperity, you can have a decent life, and still be able to breathe air, drink water, give your kids a brighter future, and avert the worst consequences of climate change. I just try to figure out how to do this in a way that I keep hoping that there will be a national response here and elsewhere that would get more people to do these things. Only other thing I want to say is Sweden passed the world's first conservative climate carbon tax in 1991, a conservative government. And what they did was they say, here's the price of carbon on our economy. Here's your tax. Now here's your money back. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
And it's popular.
The Swedes said, we trust you. So Eli, your carbon footprint for your new museum is $300,000 a year. Here's a tax, pay more tax. You send me the money. I then say, okay, now you know what you're doing. Here's your money back. I couldn't make this up. The Swedes did this. They said, here's your money back. Yeah. And what did they do? They grew their economy 50%, lowered their greenhouse gas emissions, invested all that money in greater energy efficiency and growing the economy. So really, he persuaded me in '93 we should do our carbon tax, and we passed it through the House, and then we couldn't get it through the Senate. But America would be a dramatically different and more stable country today from a climate and energy perspective if our carbon tax of '93 had become law. And so I'm glad to be here with Al. I want to encourage him to keep, educating the rest of us. And the rest of us should, those of you who, like me, can't bring the time and passion and knowledge to it, you can do a project. You can do 5 projects. One of the most encouraging thing to me is how many countries in the Middle East now are planning for diversifying their own economies and building solar power and wind power and thinking about a new future. We can all do something here And thank you for all your years, and the
thank
rest
you.
of us need to suit up.
Thank you.
On that note, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. That's
Thanks,
great.
Charlie.
Thank you.